The courtroom was silent until Karen shattered it like glass. One moment Judge Judy was calmly reading through the case file, her voice clipped and steady as always. And the next, Karen stood up mid-sentence, pointing a trembling finger at her and screaming for the cameras to hear. "This judge is breaking the law. I'm calling 911. At first people thought it was a joke. A dramatic tantrum from someone who'd already been warned 3 times to control her outbursts. But then Karen's phone was to her ear, her voice cracking as she told the emergency operator that she was being harassed by a corrupt judge. The entire courtroom froze. Even the bailiffs hesitated, unsure if they were witnessing contempt of court. Or the collapse of it. Judge Judy's eyes flicked up from the bench, her expression unreadable, almost amused. No one could have guessed what would happen next. Not the producers, not the stunned audience, not even Karen. Because while Karen thought she was about to destroy Judge Judy's career on live television, she had no idea she had just triggered the single most humiliating moment of her own life. Before we dive into how this courtroom turned upside down, hit like if you believe no one is above the law and subscribe so you never miss the moments when arrogance meets justice. The silence after Karen's 911 call was heavier than anything that had come before it. The courtroom, once a place where Judy's voice ruled like thunder, felt like a vacuum where everyone's breath had been stolen at once. What no one outside that room could understand, not the viewers at home, not the producers pacing behind the cameras, was how dangerous Karen's accusation really was. This wasn't just another outburst from a disruptive litigant. This was a direct, on-record allegation made during a live proceeding. And in the world of televised courts, even the suggestion of judicial misconduct could trigger an avalanche that didn't stop until it buried everything in its path. Judge Judy had spent decades building her reputation brick by brick, ruling with surgical precision and a signature blend of sharp wit and blunt honesty. That reputation had made her untouchable until now. Because in that split second, when Karen's voice crackled into the phone and hit the emergency dispatcher's ear, Judy wasn't the judge anymore. She was just another name on a potential criminal complaint, and the system, cold and impartial as a machine, didn't care who she was. The moment the dispatcher typed "possible judicial misconduct in progress" into their console, the gears started turning. Internal affairs notifications, court administration alerts. Even the Judicial Oversight Board could be forced to review the footage. The stakes weren't just personal, they were systemic. Judy knew that if this spiraled, her entire courtroom could be shut down pending an investigation. Episodes suspended. Staff laid off. Decades of credibility gone. Not because she was guilty, but because Karen had screamed the right words at the right moment to trigger the wrong reaction. It didn't matter that it was nonsense. In the court of public opinion, the accusation would go viral before the truth ever caught up, and it wouldn't stop with Judy. The entire network had lawyers on standby for this exact kind of nightmare scenario. A judicial misconduct probe could force the show to pull every pending episode that featured Karen, possibly the whole season, fearing claims of bias. Advertisers could flee, unwilling to attach their brands to what headlines would inevitably call a corruption scandal. Millions of dollars were quietly dangling over an invisible edge, and Karen had just kicked them all closer to the drop. But the risk didn't stop there because, while everyone's eyes were on Judy, most people missed that Karen had just walked herself straight to the edge of a legal cliff. Calling 911 isn't like making a dramatic outburst or scribbling an angry complaint form. It's a legal act. It creates a documented emergency response record with your name, your voice, your claims, and a timestamp burned into it forever. If her accusations were proven false and Judy's producers had every camera rolling from 10 different angles, Karen could face serious charges: filing a false report, obstructing justice, contempt of court, and even interfering with a judicial proceeding. Those weren't just words on paper. Filing a false report meant up to 6 months in jail. Obstruction could add another year. Contempt? That was up to Judy, and Judy was known for handing down the harshest contempt rulings on daytime television. The irony was brutal. Karen had called 911 hoping to see Judge Judy dragged out in handcuffs, not realizing she had just placed herself in perfect position to be the only one leaving in them. And still, the danger spread wider, because Karen hadn't just threatened Judy's reputation or her own freedom. She had risked destabilizing the very foundation of courtroom trust. Every case depends on one assumption, that what happens inside those walls stays inside until it's judged. When someone calls in outside authorities, it signals to the world that this courtroom can't control itself. It plants doubt in the minds of future litigants. It tells the public that maybe the courtroom isn't sacred, maybe it's chaotic, maybe anyone can throw a match and burn the whole thing down. That idea was poison. Even the bailiffs felt it creeping in. They'd spent years guarding Judy's bench like it was the last fortress of order, and now they stood frozen, glancing at each other like soldiers unsure which side the next bullet was coming from. One of them subtly rested his hand near his radio mic, ready to signal courthouse security. Another shifted closer to the bench, torn between protecting the judge or restraining the woman accusing her. That's how dangerous this had become. The very people sworn to enforce order didn't know who the threat was anymore, and behind all of it, the producers watched in quiet horror. They knew that if this spiraled, it wouldn't just be a legal mess, it would be a cultural one. Judge Judy wasn't just a person. She was an institution, a symbol of cold-eyed logic and razor-edged accountability in a world drowning in noise. If Karen managed to paint her as abusive, the blowback wouldn't stop with ratings. It would stain everything Judy stood for. Years of inspiring young law students, empowering women in the legal field, proving that authority could be firm without cruelty. It could all dissolve in a single viral clip of Karen screaming, "This judge is corrupt." Because here's the unspoken truth about television. Perception is reality until proven otherwise, and even then, reality has to scream louder than the lie. And yet, Karen had no idea she was standing on a trapdoor she built herself. While Judy sat still on the bench, appearing calm, her mind was working like a scalpel. Every camera was recording. Every transcript line was being typed by 2 live stenographers. Every single word Karen had said was already cross-checked against the case record. And Judy knew that when the police arrived, they wouldn't care about Karen's theatrics, they'd care about evidence. Cold, unforgiving evidence. And Judy had it all. That was the real twist no one saw yet. Karen had called for an investigation thinking Judy would be the one exposed. But what was about to be exposed was Karen. The media risk loomed like a shadow behind every second. If the responding officers walked in and even appeared to side with Karen at first, cameras would catch it, and the footage would race across social platforms before the hearing even ended. Judy knew that if her composure cracked even once, it would feed the narrative. If she shouted back, rolled her eyes, even smirked too soon, Karen's supporters online would clip it as proof of bias. So Judy didn't move, didn't blink. She stayed as still as marble, letting the silence wrap around the room like a fuse waiting to burn down. Karen, meanwhile, mistook that stillness as fear. Her voice rose louder on the call. "Yes, I'm inside a courtroom. Yes, it's being recorded. I don't care who she is, she's violating my rights and I want her arrested." That last word, arrested, landed like a gunshot. The producers flinched. The bailiffs straightened. Everyone knew the police had no choice now. If the call went that far, officers would have to respond, if only to make sure the threat wasn't real. The hidden danger was how fast this could spiral once uniforms arrived. Law enforcement officers have a duty to secure the scene first and ask questions later. The sight of armed police entering a live court could trigger chaos. The audience screaming, someone fainting, Karen playing the victim even harder. And if they restrained Judy for even a second to verify claims, that single moment could become the image plastered across headlines. Judge Judy detained after misconduct complaint. Even if cleared later, the damage would be irreversible. Judy understood this perfectly, which meant she also understood something else. She couldn't just win this moment. She had to control it. If she overreacted, she lost her reputation. If she underreacted, she lost her authority. If she said nothing, she lost the narrative. But if she did exactly what she was planning, calm, precise, surgical, she could not only survive this, she could end Karen's crusade in front of the world. That was the razor's edge they were all standing on. Because here's what Karen didn't know. The producers had already quietly alerted courthouse security, who were watching the live feed and reviewing every second of footage from the moment she entered the building. They had timestamps of her behavior before the hearing, when she'd been caught on camera rehearsing her speech to take down Judy. They had her admission on record that she'd make the judge look corrupt no matter what, and they were sending it to the arriving officers. Karen believed she was the whistleblower. She was actually the evidence. Outside, faint sirens began to echo in the distance. The audience gasped. Karen smiled like a queen watching her rival's execution approach, certain she had triggered Judy's downfall. She didn't realize the sound wasn't coming for Judy. It was coming for her. Long before she ever stepped into Judge Judy's courtroom, Karen had been building a reputation, and not the kind anyone envied. She called it exposing corruption. Everyone else called it chaos. Over the past 5 years, she had left a trail of courtroom wreckage behind her like storm debris. Small claims courts, housing disputes, local municipal hearings. She had appeared in them all, and not once had she walked out quietly. She filed complaints the way most people filed receipts, impulsively, excessively, and with absolute conviction that each one was a crusade for justice. One county clerk still remembered the day. Karen brought a cardboard box stuffed with binders labeled "Evidence of Judicial Abuse" that turned out to be screenshots of Facebook arguments she'd had with her neighbor. Another judge had banned her from returning to his courtroom without a psychological evaluation after she accused the stenographer of mind control. It would have been absurd if it weren't so relentless. The truth was, Karen thrived on disruption. She had built her entire identity around it. Every new case was another chance to prove the world was conspiring against her. And when the world refused to agree, she escalated until someone snapped. In her mind, that was victory. Friends, what few she still had, said she had changed after losing a minor civil case years earlier. She'd gone in expecting to be validated, and instead, the judge had ruled against her with barely a sentence. Something in her cracked. From that day forward, she treated every courtroom like enemy territory, and every judge like a personal rival. She began live streaming her appearances, coaching herself in the mirror to cry on command, practicing dramatic gasps and scripted outrage lines as if truth was just another prop she could throw. And yet, under all that arrogance, there was something far more dangerous: obsession. Karen studied judges the way gamblers study slot machines, looking for weaknesses, for patterns she could exploit. When she learned she'd been selected as a litigant for Judge Judy's televised courtroom, she didn't see it as a legal proceeding. She saw it as her stage. She told neighbors she was going to make Judy crack her. She boasted on social media that she would be the woman who finally exposed the television tyrant. What Karen didn't realize, what no one could make her understand, was that she wasn't walking into a conspiracy. She was walking into the one courtroom in America where theatrics had never once beaten truth. And in her mind, that made her challenge even sweeter. While Karen was busy choreographing chaos, Judge Judy had been building an empire of order. Judith Scheindlin didn't rise to become the most feared and most beloved television judge by accident. She forged herself in fire, in real New York courtrooms where every lie came dressed as truth and every case could explode without warning. Long before the cameras and the headlines, Judy had been a family court prosecutor navigating the darkest corridors of human conflict, abuse, neglect, fractured families. Where Karen saw courts as stages, Judy had seen them as battlegrounds, ones where emotion could never be allowed to overpower evidence. Her reputation had grown on one simple principle: control. She didn't shout to dominate a room, she simply commanded it. Lawyers who strutted into her courtroom quickly learned that their charm couldn't buy them mercy, and their theatrics couldn't hide their weaknesses. Judy dismantled them with surgical calm, stripping away everything but the facts. Over decades, that discipline hardened into something legendary. She became known not just for her rulings, but for her restraint, her ability to stand untouched while tempers around her ignited like dry grass. That was what made her courtroom sacred. It was the last place chaos feared to tread, and yet in all those years, Judy had never faced someone quite like Karen. Karen didn't want justice. She wanted spectacle. She had come armed not with evidence but with outrage, and outrage is louder than truth, at least for a while. Judy knew this. She'd seen it before in flashes, in other litigants who thought if they just shouted long enough, the court would crumble around them. What they never understood was that shouting doesn't weaken her. It only sharpens her. Even now, as Karen sat smirking after her 911 call, Judy remained still behind the bench, her hands folded neatly, her gaze steady and cold as glass. She said nothing, because she knew silence could be louder than panic. The crew could feel it, that eerie stillness before a hurricane strikes. Judy's mind was moving faster than anyone could see. Every word Karen had said was already being cataloged by 2 stenographers. Every camera angle was capturing her false claims in high definition. Judy knew the law, and she knew this. When the officers arrived, they wouldn't be walking into a performance. They'd be walking into a crime scene, and Judy would be the only one in it who came armed with proof. That was Judy's true power, the part Karen had never understood. Judy never needed to raise her voice. She didn't win with intimidation. She won with preparation so absolute that it made arrogance self-destruct. It was the same preparation that had made her one of the longest-running figures in television history. The same preparation that had made even real judges privately admit they studied her methods. Karen thought she was the storm. She didn't realize she was about to crash against a fortress that had never fallen. And Judy was ready to let her. The sirens grew louder until they were rattling the courtroom windows. Karen sat straighter, her grin stretching wider with every approaching wail. To her, those sirens were a victory parade. To everyone else, they were a warning bell. The gallery had gone utterly still, audience members holding their breath as the heavy courtroom doors creaked open and 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. Their boots hit the tile like drum beats, body cams blinking, hands near their holsters, eyes sweeping the room. Karen shot to her feet, her voice cracking into an almost triumphant shriek. "Officers, over here. It's her. That judge, she's violating my rights." She jabbed her finger toward Judge Judy like she was revealing the villain in some grand conspiracy. For a moment, the entire courtroom teetered on the edge of pandemonium. But Judy didn't move. She simply lifted her hand with the same precision she used to strike a gavel. "Officers," she said calmly, her voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "Before you act on her accusations, I recommend you review the evidence." The lead officer paused. That tone, measured, unwavering, didn't belong to someone desperate or defensive. It belonged to someone certain. He nodded once. The producers moved like clockwork, sliding a tablet across to the officers. On its screen, raw courtroom footage captured from 3 angles showing exactly what had happened from the moment Karen entered the building. They watched silently. Karen tried to interrupt, babbling about edited clips and cover-ups, but the officers raised their hands for silence. The footage showed her rehearsing her lines in the hallway. It showed her whispering to a spectator about getting Judy taken off TV. It showed the moment she stood up, mid-proceeding, and made her fabricated claims. When the video ended, the room was so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the lights. The lead officer turned slowly toward Karen. His expression had changed. The professional caution was gone, replaced by something colder, certainty. "Ma'am," he said, "you knowingly filed a false emergency report. That's a criminal offense." The words hit like thunder. Karen's smile collapsed. Before she could reply, the officers were moving. One pulled out handcuffs. The other gently took her arm. "You're under arrest for filing a false report, obstruction of justice, and contempt of court," he said. The audience gasped. The bailiff stepped back. And for the first time all day, Karen went completely silent. Judge Judy hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't flinched, shouted, or argued. She had simply waited, calm, prepared, and let the truth dismantle Karen piece by piece until there was nothing left but the sound of the handcuffs snapping shut. If you believe consequences should apply to everyone, even those who think they're untouchable, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss when arrogance finally meets justice. The clip of Karen being escorted out in handcuffs hit the internet before she even reached the holding cell. Within minutes, it was everywhere: Twitter, TikTok, news alerts, late-night shows. Millions watched in disbelief as the woman who had called 911 on Judge Judy ended up being the only person arrested. The footage replayed like a morality tale, Karen's shrill accusations echoing through the courtroom, followed by the cold click of the cuffs. Legal analysts praised Judy's composure, calling her a masterclass in judicial control under attack. Even Judy's toughest critics admitted she'd handled the ambush flawlessly, never raising her voice, never losing her grip on the truth. Former judges applauded her restraint, saying her silence had been more powerful than any gavel. Meanwhile, Karen became a meme overnight. Side-by-side clips showed her swaggering as police entered, then crumbling as they led her away. Comment sections exploded with praise for Judy and warnings about the cost of false accusations. The public had expected chaos. What they got was justice, swift, calm, undeniable. When the courtroom finally emptied, Judge Judy remained at her bench for a long moment, hands folded, eyes still and sharp. Around her, the chaos had dissolved like mist. Karen's outburst, her accusations, her performance, it was all gone, replaced by the quiet hum of order reclaiming its throne. But the impact of what had just happened didn't stay trapped in those four walls. It spread like wildfire. By the end of the day, legal blogs were dissecting Judy's handling of the ambush. Headlines praised her restraint, calling it a masterclass in authority under fire. Law professors sent the footage to their students as an example of how preparation outlasts theatrics. Former judges commented that Judy had done what even many real courtrooms fail to do: uphold dignity when attacked. Karen's story took a very different path. She was charged with filing a false report, obstruction, and contempt of court. The same social media platforms where she had once tried to build a crusade now roasted her with brutal efficiency. Memes showed her walking in with bravado and walking out in cuffs. Even those who had once cheered her anti-judge rants went silent. There was no defending what the world had seen so clearly, but perhaps the greatest consequence wasn't legal or viral, it was cultural. Judy's response reminded millions of viewers that power doesn't need to shout to be powerful, it only needs to be anchored in truth. In an era where outrage often drowns out reason, she had shown something revolutionary: that calm can be stronger than chaos, and preparation can defeat arrogance without raising its voice. In the weeks that followed, the footage of that day became required viewing in multiple law schools and mediation programs. Students were told to study Judy's posture, her tone, the way she never flinched even as the situation threatened to spiral into disaster. Business schools analyzed her response as a case study in crisis management. Commentators pointed to it as a reminder that credibility isn't earned in easy moments, it's forged in storms. Karen's downfall became the cautionary tale. Judy became the blueprint, and maybe that's the real lesson of that day: that false accusations can make noise, but they can't make truth disappear. That even when chaos walks through the door uninvited, order can stand its ground if it's ready. Because Judy wasn't lucky, she was ready. If this story inspired you to stay calm when falsely accused, like this video, subscribe for more real moments where truth defeats chaos, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because respect isn't claimed through noise, it's earned through character.